welcome. So please.
Thank you for the invitation. I was told that this was in Norwegian, so I'm going to resume in Norwegian. I'm just kidding. Thank you for the invitation to this conference. This is a conference that gathers people from all over the world. And we are delighted that this year's conference is hosted here in the beautiful city of Trondheim in the heart of Norway. Norway has been active in cryptologic research since World War II. This was, of course, secret until the 1980s. But the research has resulted in a national crypto industry since 1955 that remains active still today. Cryptologic research for government use has been the responsibility of the Norwegian Defense Security Services since 1965. Today, it's the responsibility of the Norwegian National Security Authority under the Ministry of Justice and Public Security, and several researchers from this authority are here today. Cryptologic research remains an important part of Norwegian security policy as described in the Norwegian Crypto Policy, jointly published by the Norwegian Ministry of Defense and the Norwegian Ministry of Justice and Public Security in 2019. Mathematical knowledge is, as we all know, required to construct secure crypto systems. In the 1960s, the lack of mathematicians in the Norwegian defense led to a cooperation between selected professors, researchers, and the academic community. This was very successful and has been a fruitful and continuous cooperation ever since. Professor Ernst Sejersted Selma was a key figure in establishing this cooperation. Nationally, he's probably best known for the algorithm behind the Norwegian birth numbers. In addition, his being a significant contributor to the research behind constructions of crypto systems, he established several research groups between Norwegian defense and academic communities. Very little about Selma's work was publicly known until the first Eurocrypt was held in Norway in 1993. Back then, he gave his speech or lecture named From the Memoirs of a Norwegian Cryptologist. This lecture created a lot of interest because at this time, this kind of work was publicly not very known. Today, we have several research communities within cryptology, and the Norwegian University of Science and Technology's efforts for organizing Eurocrypt is highly appreciated. We believe it is an important part of the international cooperation between authorities, industry, and the academic community. Good and widespread cryptographic standards are required for successful commercial, government, and military applications. The standardization has the added benefit of encouraging cryptologic research, increasing the trust and robustness in the standards. The rapid introduction of new technologies requires both evaluating and updating current cryptographic standards, as well as researching and developing new areas and applications of cryptology. This is obviously evident by the number of standardization activities ongoing today. In the event of any disruptive technology breakthrough, it is necessary to have active cryptology research communities within several areas of expertise. All of this requires extensive international cooperation and meeting places like Eurocrypt. I am assured that today will further help to share and build important knowledge and collaboration. Finally, I would take this opportunity to thank the International Association of Cryptologic Research, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology for hosting this conference and all other parts involved. I hope that you will enjoy the conference and you stay here in Trondheim. I wish you good luck and thank you.
Okay, so I have a few things to say. Thank you very much, State Secretary, for that very interesting introduction. And First thing I would like to say is that it's really great to have everybody here in person and such a large conference. But I would like to start by reminding you that we're under the shadow of war in Europe, and remind you of the statement from the IACR condemning the Russian war in Ukraine. So I'll just read the statement, which you can find on the IACR webpage, that the IACR strongly condemns the unprovoked and unjust war that Russia is waging in Ukraine. We are outraged by the suffering and loss of life that this brutal aggression is inflicting on the Ukrainian people. Next thing, important point I'd like to remind you of is that everybody who registers for Eurocrypt and every IACR conference signs the Code of Conduct. I'd like to remind you that if you experience harassment or discriminatory behavior at Eurocrypt or at any IACR event, we encourage you to reach out and find someone who can help. And at Eurocrypt 2022, we have 3 specific people who you can contact. We have the Code of Conduct liaison, Tal Rabin. I don't know if Tal is actually here, but if she's not here right now, she will be here. The IACR president, Michel Abdallah. I don't know if Michel is here yet. I know he came in extremely late last night. And myself. So please, if you do experience anything you feel is inappropriate, please come and talk to one of us. And of course, we will do what we can to help. Now, other reminders. I'd like you to remind you to wear your badge at all times, especially tonight if you're coming to the cathedral. And tomorrow for the rump session. They're kind of very areas with lots of people about, so please wear your badge so we know that you're a Eurocrypt participant. If you have an accompanying person who doesn't have a badge, just make sure that you accompany that person into the cathedral or into the rump session, thank you. And now, yes, the rump session. So the rump session will take place on Wednesday evening, starting around about 19:15. And I want to remind you, submission for the rump session is open now. And it will close on Wednesday at 1300 sharp. So please, please do put your submissions in. We're waiting for you. I'd like to remind all speakers that it's extremely important for us that you upload your slides at least 24 hours beforehand. We have a very complex process to make sure that everything is set up for every session every day, because we have to interleave between the online and in-person presentations. So please help us by uploading your slides. If you have any doubt, please come and talk to someone, and we have our technicians here and we'll be in the other room. And that reminds me, some of you have white lanyards for your badges, some of you have blue ones, and some of us have these lanyards which say NTNU. If you those people with an NTNU lanyard, these are the ones who are on the organizing committee from our NTNU Applied Crypto Lab. So please ask any of us at any time if you have any questions about anything. Yes, or also ask me to ensure that speakers should keep the time, and that session chairs should ensure that the timetable is appropriately kept in check. And finally, and extremely importantly, I would like to finish by thanking our sponsors. We have quite a number of sponsors. You'll see their logos around, and they'll be on up during the breaks and so on. So we're really grateful for their support. And I'd like to particularly mention Zama, the CCIS Center of NTNU, and the Norwegian Research Council, who have been our major sponsors. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Yuval, who's going to introduce the best paper presentation.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many people after such a long time. We're starting the technical program with a bang, with the Best Paper Award talk. The talk is on EpiGRAM, Practical Garbled RAM by David Heath, Vladimir Kolesnikov, and Rafail Ostrovsky, and Dave will give the talk.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that nice introduction, Yuval. It's obviously a great honor to be here, and I'm excited to tell you all about some work that we think is pretty exciting. So as soon as we have slides, today I'm going to be talking about Garbled RAM. So Garbled RAM is a relatively new technology in the space of secure multi-party computation. The first Garbled RAM construction appeared about 10 years ago. And while it's a very exciting result in its original form, it had some problems in terms of the practical efficiency of the construction. So today I want to tell you some details about what Garbled RAM is and what we do in this work to make this technology far more efficient than it was before. So again, well, okay, again, we are talking about secure multi-party computation, and in particular, secure two-party computation. So just as a quick reminder to everybody, secure two-party computation has this very simple definition that essentially we have two parties, each of whom have some private input, and they agree on some function that they'd like to compute over that. And the idea is they should receive the output of this function and nothing more. Now in MPC, we know that we can instantiate this functionality using garbled circuits. Namely, as long as the function f can be instantiated as a Boolean circuit, then we can efficiently run that program under encryption. So garbled circuits are really attractive for two important reasons. The first is that garbled circuits allow for constant round protocols. And the second is that garbled circuits are based primarily on efficient symmetric key primitives. And what these two properties mean together is basically we can build fast and flexible protocols, and a lot of MPC ends up being built on this basic technology. Now, while garbled circuits has these nice characteristics, it does have some issues. And the one I want to talk about today is actually in the name. It's the circuits part, right? Again, we're talking about running arbitrary programs, arbitrary functions on private data. And if you think about, I'd like for you to imagine that the program that we're running is written in some kind of high-level language or something like this. And the problem is that many natural programs, when compiled all the way down to circuits, end up with a very large circuit representation. There's just a large polynomial blowup when you take an arbitrary program and compile it to a circuit. The reason this is an issue is because in garbled circuits, our cost scales proportionally with the number of gates in our circuit. So what would be nice is if we could have some other kind of representation that would more efficiently capture arbitrary programs. So this was what motivated the original constructions on garbled RAM. The idea of garbled RAM is to replace the circuit model of computation with a RAM machine. So to say that a slightly different way, what we want is we still want to have all the flexible power of having circuits, but we want that circuit to be able to also efficiently read and write to some large main memory. Okay, and we want this to happen while retaining our important constant round property and our important reliance on symmetric key primitives. So this problem becomes interesting when we insist that this reading and writing has to be efficient. And by efficient, I mean that the parties should be expending cost that's at most polylogarithmic in the size of the memory. Okay. So indeed, it's possible to do this. And Steve Liu and Rafail Ostrovsky showed that you could do this back in 2013. Now, while that was a really exciting result, it came with some very serious baggage. So specifically, the original construction made some non-standard assumptions. In particular, there was this circularity assumption that needed to be made to prove this original construction secure. And additionally, while the asymptotic complexity that indeed achieved polylogarithmic overhead, some of the constants involved, what is the polylog factor? What are the constants? These were not so great. And it meant that this was not the kind of technology that people are going out and actually implementing and putting on the web for people to use. Okay. So since this original work, there has been a lot of follow-up on garbled RAM. And in particular, there's been a few works which have addressed kind of the core of garbled RAM, trying to improve the primitive itself. But these works have addressed this non-standard assumptions part. Okay. And thanks to these works today, we have garbled RAM constructions that make only standard assumptions. But these prior works have done essentially nothing to address the problem of high concrete overhead. So what we do in this work is we look at the high concrete overhead. Can we make garbled RAM something that we might hope to implement? And indeed we can. So what I have on the slide here is essentially the most important statement of our result, which is the asymptotic complexity. How much does it cost for the circuit to read or write to main memory? And what I'm doing here is I'm comparing to this prior work, GLO 15. Okay. Now, this should be treated as representative of garbled RAMs. They have slightly different costs, but I chose this one because it's the easiest to see where our improvement is. Okay, so there's a lot of complexity in these expressions, but I want you to focus on the main differences. So there's essentially two important differences here. So the first one is that we have this improvement in the scaling of the security parameter, going from quadratic scaling down to linear scaling. Now, this is really important because typically in garbled circuits, we expect there to be some kind of scaling in the linear scaling in the security parameter. So for instance, if you go download the EMP toolkit, which is a widely available tool for garbled circuits, that tool is going to have scaling in the security parameter. Okay. But all prior garbled RAMs, in fact, had this quadratic scaling, which made them just very infeasible for practical settings. So we eliminate this weakness. And the second part that I want to emphasize is this improvement in the polylogarithmic factor, which again is just driving down the cost. Now, in fact, these two sources of improvement come from two different places. So the first is this reduction in the security parameter. And here, what we did to achieve this was we came up with a new kind of encoding that works inside the garbled circuit that is specific to some of the internal tasks of garbled RAM. I'm actually not going to talk about this any further than this. If you'd like to hear more, come and talk to me. But basically, we introduced a new kind of garbled circuit gate, a new kind of gate for the circuit that is extremely efficient for specific tasks of the garbled RAM. The second part I do want to talk about a little bit more. And the second part is that we drive down the polylog cost by building a new kind of garbled circuit data structure that solves efficiently sort of the central problem of garbled RAM. So what I would like to do for the remainder of this talk is tell you a little bit about what is this central problem of garbled RAM and what is, at least at a high level, what is this new data structure that solves this problem efficiently? Okay, so to show this, I'm going to consider a significant weakening of the core problem. Okay, so in generality, garbled RAM is supposed to be a full RAM that is oblivious. And by oblivious, what I mean is in a garbled circuit, one party is going to actually run that circuit and evaluate that circuit at runtime. And in generality, that party is going to see the access pattern to the RAM. Now, in full garbled RAM, since we're trying to achieve 2PC, it's not secure for this party to learn the actual logical access pattern of that RAM. So you can hide the actual logical access pattern with standard tools from oblivious RAM. So all of these things can be done, but today I just want to think about a weakening where we think about just read-only memory, where this evaluator who's actually running the garbled circuit is allowed to learn the access pattern of this read-only memory. In fact, even more than that, I want to consider a read-only memory where you're only allowed to read each memory slot at most once, okay? It turns out that even this much weaker problem, much simpler problem, presents clearly the core technical challenge of garbled RAM. Okay, so what is this core technical challenge? Well, let's consider trying to actually do this thing where we read something at runtime from some kind of read-only memory and then put it into a circuit. So in particular, I have this AND gate on the right. And what I would like to do is at runtime, the garbled circuit is going to choose an index into this read-only memory on the left. Okay, and it's going to tell the garbled circuit evaluator, hey, evaluator, please go get this index from the read-only memory and put it onto, in particular, this top wire of the AND gate. Okay, so if we start looking at mechanically what this means, we're going to see there's a problem. Because in a garbled circuit, we do not put clear text bits on the wires. Instead, we put encodings of bits. So instead of the wire holding 0 or 1, there will be 2 possible encryption keys that could be on that wire. Now I'm going to refer to the pair of these possible keys that could be on this wire as the so-called language of that wire. And the important point is that to actually use a gate in the garbled circuit, you have to pass in labels that match the language. If you pass in anything else, it just doesn't work. And the reason is that this is significant is for security, we also do not store clear text 0s and 1s in our memory. Instead, we also store encryption keys in this memory. So now let's consider what I said. The garbled circuit tells the evaluator, hey, evaluator, please go grab some particular value from this memory and put it on this wire. And you can see just syntactically, there's a problem. Because the value that the evaluator grabs doesn't match the language of the wire. So this is the central problem of garbled RAM, is this language translation issue that we have to translate languages stored in the memory dynamically to a language expected by some target wire. Okay. So for the remainder of this talk, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how we actually go about solving this problem. And again, the way that we do it is by introducing a new data structure, which we call a lazy permutation network. And what this lazy permutation network does is it solves this language translation problem in an amortized way. So what I mean is, on the left here, I have n memory cells, which we're going to be able to read each of them at most once. And on the right, I have wires, which we would like to read those memory cells onto in some arbitrary order that's decided at runtime. Okay, so in particular, the garbled circuit starts running and it says, hey, evaluator, please go connect up some memory cell on the left to some wire on the right. Okay. And as the garbled circuit continues to run, it continues to reveal positions in this memory on the left and allow the evaluator to connect wires to the right. And the important point here is, first of all, you can see that this is some kind of permutation. We're permuting the memory elements to the wires on the right. And also, importantly, this permutation is in a sense lazy. And what I mean by this is that the order in which things are permuted is not fully decided at the beginning. This permutation is revealed to the evaluator over time. And what this means is that a lot of standard solutions to how you permute values inside of a circuit won't work here. We need something slightly more powerful. Okay. So let me try to explain to you a little bit of the detail. I'm not going to go to great length, but a little bit of the detail of how we actually implement this lazy permutation network. The crucial insight is this idea that we call dynamic soldering and evaluation. So essentially, what we need is some kind of mechanism at a small scale that allows the evaluator to dynamically run one out of a constant number of circuits at runtime. So what I mean here is that at runtime, the garbled circuit declares to the evaluator, hey, evaluator, please connect the wire on the right to one of these two circuits on the left, and then run that circuit, okay? The important point here, so first of all, let me say what I'm showing here is that it's actually very easy to achieve this in a small scale where there's a constant number of circuits on the left here by just conditionally revealing, allowing the evaluator to decrypt different linear combinations of these languages on the wires. Okay, so my core point here is just if the problem is small, if there's a constant number of circuits on the left, this problem is very easy to solve. Okay, and the important point here is that after having connected up one of these circuits at runtime, the evaluator consumes the circuit that has been connected up, but very importantly, the other circuit is still there and it can be used later on. So what I mean is that when another wire says, hey, please connect up to that other circuit, we can reuse that same circuit that was already sitting there. And this is how we're going to get our amortization and how we're going to get our polylog cost. Okay, so this dynamic soldering and evaluation allows us to solve this lazy permutation problem, but only at a small scale, right? Because the problem is, it turns out if I put a large number of circuits on the left and I want to directly connect one wire to one of these large numbers of circuits, I have to include a lot of encryptions, a linear number of encryptions that says, what is this language translation value for each possible circuit? Okay, so as we increase the number of circuits, it doesn't quite work. Instead, we need something a little bit more clever here. And the idea is to build a kind of tree of circuits, each of which can communicate with one another. Now, I'm going to elide, for the purposes of time, a great amount of detail here, but if you have more questions, please come talk to me about it. But the idea here is to build circuits which can communicate only with their neighbors to their left. And each of these circuits is made efficient by using a stack-based data structure, which is storing kind of the languages of the circuits to the left. And the core idea is that as accesses come in from the top right, the evaluator is going to be able to dynamically traverse this tree and connect up to the RAM slot that she actually wants. Okay, and as she is doing this, the important point is she traverses this tree to get to the memory cell that she cares about, and she's not touching any other of the circuits in this tree. Okay, so all of these other circuits, all of the circuits on the top are still there, unused, and we can use them later on. So when subsequent memory access come in, we can traverse the tree in a different direction and connect that one up as well. Okay, so by repeatedly doing this, what's happening here is we have one circuit which we're going to be able to fully utilize over the course of n accesses. And each of these n accesses is fully dynamically decided, and we fully use this circuit which has size n log square n for n reads. Okay, so this was our work on garbled RAM. So again, the core contribution is this significant asymptotic improvement to the cost of garbled RAM. So whereas before we had this quadratic scaling in the security parameter, we now have this linear scaling in the security parameter. And now we also have only log square, what I would call overhead, compared to what you would expect from normal garbled circuits. Now, I don't think this is the finish line, and we fully expect that we can build on this approach and drive down the cost of garbled RAM even further to make it truly the sort of thing that is just a default implementation that you get from tools online like the EMP toolkit. And already today, what I'm plotting here is the performance of our technique and comparing it to so-called trivial garbled RAM, which is garbled RAM where you implement it just as a plain Boolean circuit without any of the sophisticated techniques I measured here. And already with what we've done, the break-even point where our polylog cost starts to beat out this linear cost RAM is only at about 500 RAM elements. And again, we expect that to significantly improve in the near future. So we think this is really exciting, in particular because we think it's going to open the door to taking off-the-shelf programs, doing something like starting with a C program, and then compiling that down to an assembly language, which we can run in a CPU emulation style directly inside Garbled computation. And we're going to be able to do all this without paying exorbitant cost for the reading and writing of main memory, which traditionally is the bottleneck of that sort of approach. So with that, I will wrap up, and I would be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave, for the great talk. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
Can I ask you, here, is the overhead which allows you to read this memory, all the memory?
Oh, I see. Yeah, so that's a great question. Sorry, this is the amortized cost per access in this plot.
Yeah.
If I have a RAM program that reads 100, has to read, no, it's a binary set, so read 100 elements.
Yes.
For example, I would spend that much times 100.
Correct.
Yeah. Can you?
Oh, yes. So the question was, is what's plotted here the cost for reading the entire memory, or is it just the cost for reading one element? The answer is the cost for just reading one element. So the follow-up was a clarification. So for example, if there's a binary search in the program where you have to, look at 100 elements in some data structure or something, you do indeed have to pay this cost 100 times. Yeah. So this is the per access cost.
So you have to know how many times the RAM program is going to read, and that's how much garbage.
Yeah, and so the question here was, so do you have to know ahead of time how many times you're going to read and write memory? And yes, the answer is you do have to know that. So in this model I'm talking about where you would do some sort of full CPU emulation, what you would do is pre-allocate and say, this is how much time we need, this is how much space we need. And that would be some leakage in addition to the output of the function. Yes. No.
Is it only symmetric key stuff you use? You only use symmetric stuff?
That's right. We only use symmetric key primitives here. Yes.
Yes. Another question there. Yeah, maybe you can come and ask.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. So this is mostly about worst case complexity, right?
Yes.
Because people designing CPUs and RAM and cache, they use a lot of heuristic to optimize, for example, cache access. Do you think that this is a direction that could be interesting for Garbled circuits as well?
That is a terrific question. And we've actually looked at this some, and it's not particularly clear to me, actually, what the answer is going to be here. Yeah, so what does the architecture look like that you actually want to do CPU emulation like with in a Garbled setting? I suspect it's going to look quite different than what we do in clear text computing, and I don't have the answers there yet. I apologize.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, one final quick question of my own. Can you say a bit about how this compares to the best solutions that use high round complexity, say in the context of binary search, if you allow logarithmically many rounds?
Mm-hmm.
How does this compare to the best solution that uses logarithmically many rounds?
Right. So the difference between, say, an oblivious RAM and garbled RAM is, first of all, of course, we're winning in terms of the round complexity. At the moment, we're paying an extra log factor compared to the best ORAMs. To be honest, I fully expect that to go away.
I was referring to the secure version, right? So if you want to do 2PC for ORAM, but allow the round complexity to grow with the runtime. So you're saying there is a log factor gap?
Yes. I mean, so depending on what you're doing, so for instance, if you're using secure computation ORAM in conjunction with a garbled circuit, then here ours is extremely competitive in terms of the communication cost. And in fact, I sort of suspect it will win out in the end as we improve this technique. Mm-hmm. If you are using something like a secret share based protocol, then here we're of course paying the extra security parameter overhead associated with the garbled circuit. So there it depends a little bit more on your specific setting, which would be better.
Okay. Yes.
Hello, sir. So you have introduced lazy permutation network in garbled circuits. So can you please tell me, instead of garbled circuit, where we can use this lazy permutation?
So that is a great question. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I don't have a good answer for you there where else it is useful. I will say that within garbled circuits, it seems like a more powerful mechanism than just garbled RAM, because what it's really allowing you to do is dynamically run circuits in an arbitrary order, and intuitively that seems extremely powerful. We haven't found any use cases for this other than garbled RAM yet, though.
So nobody have used before the lazy permutation?
Well, so this is our construction, this lazy permutation network that we built for this paper.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, I guess we can take further questions offline, and let's thank again Dave. And, yeah, so we're slightly late, but the next talk starts in 7 minutes.
Thanks. Before you go, can I just make three quick announcements? Firstly, if it's not obvious, this is Cosmos 1.2, where track 1 will happen. Cosmos 3 is, well, through that door or around the other way, just in the other part of the room here. We do have track switch breaks to allow you to walk there. To get there. Secondly, I'd like to ask you, please, all session chairs, all speakers, please report to the desk, either in here, if you're in here, or in Cosmos 3, before the session starts, so we can instruct you on using the microphones and getting set up. And finally, yeah, I think this actually worked out in the end, but please note we do have 2 microphones for questions, also in the other room, so please use those, otherwise people online will not be able to hear the questions. Thanks.